Today we stand witness to a moment in history, one that is marked by unwavering conviction, clarity of purpose, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The words spoken today are not merely rhetoric, but a call to action, a cry for unity, and a bold declaration of the values that bind us together as a global community. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed delegates, and honored guests, today we stand witness to a moment in history, one that is marked by unwavering conviction, clarity of purpose, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The words spoken today are not merely rhetoric, but a call to action, a cry for unity, and a bold declaration of the values that bind us together as a global community. As leaders of nations, we have long acknowledged our shared responsibilities in the face of growing challenges, the need for peace, prosperity, and the protection of human dignity. But too often, these lofty ideals are overshadowed by division, complacency, and conflict. Today, however, we hear a different message. A message that demands we rise above the status quo, that urges us to confront the crises of our time with courage and resolve. The speech delivered today is not just the expression of an individual, but the voice of millions whose hopes and struggles resonate across continents. It is the voice of the oppressed, the marginalized, and the voiceless, calling for a world where justice is not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. What we heard today was a powerful reminder that true leadership is not defined by the size of one's nation or the wealth it holds, but by the depth of one's commitment to the universal ideals of freedom, equality, and dignity. In these words, we are reminded that no one, regardless of their background or station, should ever be left behind. The speech delivered today has reverberated not just in this hall, but across the globe. It is a historic moment that will be remembered for its boldness and clarity, its focus on the importance of solidarity among nations, and its unwavering support for those who have been denied their basic human rights for far too long. At this critical juncture in world affairs, it is imperative that we take heed of the message presented before us. We must move beyond rhetoric and transform these ideals into tangible actions. We must come together not as individual nations with separate interests, but as a collective force committed to building a future where peace and justice are not mere aspirations, but achievable realities. As we reflect on the powerful words that have just been spoken, let us remember that history is not made by those who stand idly by. It is made by those who dare to speak truth to power, who challenge the status quo, and who fight relentlessly for a better tomorrow. Today we are reminded of our collective responsibility to each other and to the future generations who will look back on this moment in time. Now is the time to reaffirm our commitment to the values we hold dear. Now is the time to act, to ensure that the dreams of a just and equitable world are not relegated to mere hopes, but realized in the actions we take today. In the face of the mounting challenges our world is grappling with, the message delivered today calls us to unite as one global community. It urges us to put aside our differences, our national borders, and the barriers that have long separated us in pursuit of a higher, more meaningful purpose. In the deepest sense, it reminds us that the struggles we face are not isolated to any one corner of the world, nor are they restricted to any one people or group. We are all interconnected in a way that transcends geography, culture, and politics. Today we are reminded that ultimately we share a common destiny. Our fates are intertwined. When we look across the globe, we see countries ravaged by conflict, economies torn apart by inequality, communities displaced by the devastating effects of climate change. These crises are not simply distant problems that can be ignored or pushed to the margins of our attention. They are urgent, real, and they affect us all. The struggles of one nation echo in the lives of others, reverberating across oceans and continents, because the challenges we face in this interconnected world are far too vast and complex to be solved by individual nations acting in isolation. The pandemics of disease, the rise in extremism, the environmental crises, and the deepening social divides do not respect borders. They know no nationality, and they affect not only those who are directly in their path, but also those who may think themselves safe from their immediate impact. In this context, the message today is clear. The time to think of ourselves only as citizens of a single nation has passed. We must now see ourselves as part of a global family. When one of us suffers, whether from war, famine, or injustice, we all feel the weight of that suffering. We cannot turn a blind eye and pretend that we are untouched. The humanitarian crises unfolding in various regions around the world are not isolated incidents. They are a reflection of a broken system, a system where the rich, powerful, and privileged continue to thrive, while the most vulnerable are left behind, neglected and forgotten. These crises demand that we look inward, examine our own responsibilities, and ask ourselves, what can we do to help heal these wounds? How can we extend our hands in solidarity to those who are in desperate need? The message that one's suffering is another's responsibility resonates profoundly today, urging us to think beyond narrow self-interest. When we witness suffering, whether on our doorstep or on the other side of the world, it should evoke a sense of shared humanity, a recognition that we are all bound together in this fragile world. This shared sense of responsibility transcends the traditional definitions of us and them, urging us to replace division with empathy, rivalry with cooperation. It calls on us to put aside old prejudices, to rise above the politics of fear, and to embrace a future that is defined not by our differences but by the common goals that we can achieve together. The unity of purpose that is being called for is not simply about helping others when they are in need. It is about building a world where suffering is lessened for all. When one of us rises, when one nation is able to overcome its hardships, that success is a victory for all. We all benefit when one country is able to provide its citizens with opportunity, equality, and justice. We all stand to gain when one nation finds sustainable solutions to its challenges, whether they be economic, social, or environmental. In this interconnected world, there is no such thing as isolated progress. Every step forward made by one nation toward peace, prosperity, or justice can be a beacon of hope for others. It shows that change is possible, that we can build a world where everyone has a chance to thrive. This speech, delivered in this monumental assembly, reminds us of the tremendous power of solidarity. It calls upon us to put aside our differences and recognize that we are all part of a larger, interconnected web. When we act with compassion and unity, we can tackle even the most intractable problems. We can address global poverty, provide education for every child, protect our planet from the ravages of climate change, and create economies that work for all. But these efforts require collaboration. They require that we abandon the notion that one nation's success must come at the expense of another's. Instead, we must embrace the idea that when one of us rises, we all rise. The challenges we face are not small, nor are they easily overcome, but they are not insurmountable if we stand together as one global family, bound by the shared responsibility of ensuring that no one is left behind. The power of solidarity is not just in our words, but in our actions. We must act not for our own gain, but for the collective well-being of all humanity. Only when we work together, recognizing that the fate of one is the fate of all, can we hope to achieve the kind of world we envision, a world of peace, justice, and opportunity for every person, everywhere. In the end, this speech is a powerful reminder that our strength lies not in our divisions, but in our unity. It urges us to rise above the narrow confines of national self-interest and embrace a broader, more inclusive vision. A vision where, in times of struggle and hardship, we look to one another not as distant strangers, but as brothers and sisters in the shared human experience. Together, we are capable of achieving the impossible. Together, we can create a world where no one suffers alone. In the heart of this historic speech, the cries of the oppressed, the forgotten, and the marginalized have been given a voice. For far too long, these voices have been silenced, drowned out by the noise of political agendas, economic interests, and the pursuit of power. Their pain has been ignored, their hopes dismissed, and their struggles left unaddressed by those in positions of influence. But today, that silence is shattered. Today, the voiceless have spoken through the words that have reverberated across this assembly. In this powerful address, their suffering, their dreams, and their desperate need for justice have been brought into the light, compelling us to confront a truth we can no longer ignore. The injustice faced by millions around the world is not a distant abstract concept. It is a daily reality for countless people who are born into conditions of poverty, discrimination, and violence. These individuals, often invisible to the world, are denied the most basic human rights, rights that so many of us take for granted. They are denied access to education, healthcare, and the opportunities that would allow them to build a better life for themselves and their family. They are denied the dignity and respect that should be afforded to every human being, regardless of where they are born or the circumstances of their lives. Today's speech is a heartbreaking reminder that despite the progress we have made in some parts of the world, millions of people still live in conditions that are unworthy of our shared humanity. They are caught in a cycle of suffering, one that is perpetuated by inequality, corruption, and the neglect of those who hold power. These individuals are not merely statistics or faceless victims, they are real people with hopes, dreams, and families. They are mothers who want a better future for their children, fathers who struggle to provide for their families, and young people who are yearning for a chance to prove their potential. But their cries for help have often fallen on deaf ears, their stories ignored, their pleas for justice disregarded. What is perhaps most tragic is that their suffering is not inevitable. It is not the result of some immutable law of nature or fate. It is the result of systemic inequality, of a global order that too often places the interests of the few above the needs of the many. It is the result of a world where wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of a small elite. While millions live in poverty, their voices muted and their struggles unseen. These people are often the victims of conflict, of exploitation, and of social systems that perpetuate injustice. They are displaced by war, persecuted because of their ethnicity or religion, and trapped in cycles of violence and oppression that seem endless. Their suffering is not a natural disaster but a man-made tragedy, one that continues year after year, decade after decade, without any real effort to address the root causes. But today, these individuals are no longer invisible. Today, they have found a voice in the words spoken for us. The speech we have heard today is a call to action, a demand that we no longer turn a blind eye to their suffering, that we no longer allow their pain to go unheard. It is a powerful reminder that the cries for justice that have echoed in the dark corners of the world for so long must now be met with action. We cannot afford to let these voices fade into the background, to allow their suffering to become just another tragic chapter in the history of human neglect. In this speech, we are reminded that these voices are not only cries of pain, but also of hope. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them, despite the forces that work to keep them down, these individuals continue to dream of a better world. They dream of a world where their children are not born into poverty, where their families are not torn apart by violence, and where their rights are respected and protected. Their dreams are not unrealistic. They are the dreams of every human being, a chance to live in dignity, to have access to opportunity, and to live a life free from fear and oppression. But for these dreams to become a reality, we must act. We must recognize that the suffering of the voiceless is not separate from our own. It is a shared burden, one that will not be lifted until we take collective responsibility for creating a more just and equitable world. We cannot stand idly by and allow the suffering of millions to continue unabated. The time to act is now. We must ensure that these voices are not drowned out by indifference or apathy, but that they are heard and answered with the urgency and compassion they deserve. This speech also calls on us to challenge the structures that perpetuate this suffering. It calls on us to confront the systems of inequality, exploitation, and injustice that continue to affect so many. It asks us to break down the barriers that prevent the most marginalized from accessing the opportunities and resources they need to build a better life. This is not just a moral imperative, it is a practical necessity. When entire populations are denied the basic tools they need to succeed, the whole world suffers. We cannot afford to leave so many behind, as their potential to contribute to the world is stifled by poverty, discrimination, and neglect. Ultimately, the voice of the voiceless is a call for justice, for a world where no one is left behind, where no one is forgotten, and where every human being is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. This speech serves as a poignant reminder that we are all responsible for the suffering of others, and that we must act to change the systems that perpetuate that suffering. We cannot afford to let these voices fade into silence again. Today, we are called to answer their cries, to ensure that their stories are heard, and to work together to create a world where justice is not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. Leadership, as we have been reminded today, is not defined by the titles we hold or the privileges we enjoy. It is not about the accumulation of power or the prestige that comes with occupying the highest offices. Leadership is at its core about the ability to make difficult decisions in the name of justice, even when the road ahead is unclear and the consequences of those decisions are uncertain. In today's speech, we are called to reflect on the true nature of leadership, the kind of leadership that is required in moments of crisis, when the world looks to us not for promises of easy answers, but for the courage to act despite the unknowns that lie ahead. In a world where the pressures of political maneuvering, personal ambition, and public opinion often weigh heavily on leaders, it is easy to forget that true leadership demands a deeper commitment, a commitment to justice, to truth, and to the betterment of humanity. True leaders do not shy away from the hard work that comes with confronting inequality, conflict, and injustice. They do not take refuge in the comfort of the status quo or allow themselves to be swayed by the convenience of inaction. Instead, they rise to the challenge, even when the path is fraught with difficulty and opposition. They lead by example, showing the world that courage, integrity, and conviction are far more valuable than any title or accolade. Today's speech serves as a powerful reminder of the kind of leadership that is urgently needed in our world. We have witnessed too many instances where leaders have failed to act when their people needed them most, whether out of fear, complacency, or self-interest. In times of great adversity, these leaders retreat into silence, hoping that the storm will pass without their intervention. But this is not the kind of leadership the world needs. The challenges we face, whether they are political, social, economic, or environmental, demand decisive action. The world does not need leaders who are afraid to make hard choices or who are more concerned with preserving their own power than with serving the people who have entrusted them with leadership. What we need now more than ever are leaders who are willing to speak truth to power, who are not afraid to stand up for what is right, even when it is unpopular or politically costly. In the face of injustice, true leaders are the ones who refuse to remain silent. They are the ones who stand up in moments of crisis and call out the wrongs that others are too afraid to acknowledge. They are not swayed by the fear of backlash or the pressure of public opinion. Instead, they take a stand for what is just, for what is right, and for the values that should guide our actions as a global community. The speech we have heard today is a testament to this kind of leadership, one that does not shy away from the uncomfortable truths, but confronts them head-on with courage and conviction. One of the most powerful aspects of today's speech is the call for leaders to act decisively in the face of uncertainty. Leadership is often at its most difficult when the future is unclear, when the solutions to complex problems are not immediately apparent, and when the consequences of action or inaction are not easily predicted. But it is precisely in these moments of ambiguity that true leaders rise to the occasion. They do not wait for perfect conditions or for the safety of certainty. Instead, they make the tough choices, knowing that their decisions will have profound effects on the lives of millions. They understand that leadership is not about avoiding risk, but about navigating it with wisdom, integrity, and a deep commitment to the greater good. The courage to act, even when the outcome is uncertain, is what sets true leaders apart. It requires a strength of character and a clarity of purpose that is often in short supply in today's world. Too often we see leaders who prioritize short-term gains or personal ambition over the long-term well-being of their people. They make decisions based on what is politically expedient or what will keep them in power, rather than what is best for the future. But true leadership is about looking beyond the present moment and understanding that the decisions we make today will shape the world we leave behind for future generations. Today's speech challenges us to reflect on the kind of leaders we are, both individually and collectively. It asks us to examine whether we are living up to the ideals of leadership that have been set before us. Are we acting with courage in the face of adversity? Are we making decisions that are guided by the values of justice, fairness, and equality? Or are we, like so many before us, allowing ourselves to be swayed by convenience, by fear, or by the allure of power? Leadership is not a passive endeavor. It is a call to action, a responsibility that demands our full attention, commitment, and dedication. It requires that we constantly ask ourselves, what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? Will we be remembered as those who stood idly by while the world suffered, or as those who took bold steps to create a more just, equitable, and compassionate world? The decisions we make today will shape the world for generations to come, and we must ask ourselves whether we are making those decisions with the kind of integrity and vision that true leadership demands. In the end, leadership is not about seeking glory or recognition. It is about serving others, about doing what is right, even when it is difficult, and about inspiring others to do the same. True leaders are the ones who inspire hope, who motivate others to action, and who stand firm in their commitment to justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Today's speech is a reminder that the kind of leadership we need in our world is not one that seeks power for its own sake, but one that is dedicated to creating a better world for all people everywhere. And it is up to each and every one of us to embody that leadership, to make the difficult decisions, and to act with the courage and conviction that our world so desperately needs. At its core, this speech is a passionate and urgent declaration of the fundamental right to human dignity, reminding us that our shared humanity must always be the guiding principle by which we measure the actions we take, both individually and collectively. Human dignity is not a privilege reserved for the fortunate few. It is an inalienable right afforded to every person, regardless of their background, nationality, or circumstances. And yet, as we reflect on the harsh realities facing so many people around the world today, we are compelled to ask ourselves, how can we call ourselves a global community when so many still live in poverty, fear, and oppression? How can we stand by while millions of people are denied the most basic rights they are entitled to, stripped of their humanity and left to struggle against the tide of inequality and injustice? This speech forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth we so often wish to ignore. It challenges us to look beyond the comforts of our own lives, the privileges we may take for granted, and the insular walls we build to separate ourselves from the suffering of others. It calls on us to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every human life, no matter where that life is lived, and regardless of the circumstances that may surround it. How can we as a global community justify the staggering disparities that exist in the world today? The vast gaps between the wealthy and the impoverished, the powerful and the powerless, the free and the oppressed. How can we claim to care about justice and equality when so many people are denied their most basic rights? The right to live without fear, the right to access education, the right to health care, the right to a future. In many parts of the world, the fight for human dignity is not an abstract concept. It is a daily struggle for survival. For countless individuals, life is a constant battle against poverty, exploitation, and oppression. From the children who are forced to work in inhumane conditions, to the refugees fleeing violence and persecution, from the marginalized communities who face systemic discrimination, to the elderly and disabled who are often forgotten by society. These individuals are all fighting for the same thing, their dignity. It is a fight against forces that seek to strip away their humanity, to reduce them to mere statistics or faceless victims. And yet, despite these overwhelming odds, these individuals continue to dream of a better future, to hold on to the hope that one day their basic rights will be recognized and their dignity will be restored. This speech compels us to take a hard look at our own complicity in perpetuating the systems that deny so many their dignity. It asks us to reflect on the ways in which our own actions or inactions have contributed to a world where inequality, injustice, and human rights violations continue to thrive. We cannot claim to value human dignity if we allow these systems to persist unchecked. We cannot claim to be a global community if we fail to recognize the suffering of those who are excluded from the benefits of progress, prosperity, and peace. This is a call for introspection, for understanding that our collective failure to address these issues is a moral failing that we must no longer ignore. The message of this speech is not just one of guilt or condemnation. It is a message of hope and responsibility. It stirs our hearts because it reminds us that we have the power to make a difference, that we can take action to restore dignity to those who have been denied it. Every human life, regardless of circumstance, is precious and deserving of respect and opportunity. This message challenges us to act not just for the benefit of the few, but for the well-being of all people everywhere. It urges us to extend our sense of justice and compassion beyond our own borders, to understand that the suffering of others diminishes us all. We are all bound together in the shared experience of being human, and when one of us is denied dignity, It affects the integrity of the entire human family. The weight of human dignity lies not just in the rights we claim for ourselves, but in the responsibility we take for others. The rights to freedom, equality, and justice are not simply words on paper or ideals to be admired from a distance. They are the building blocks of a society where every individual is treated with respect and given the opportunity to thrive. To deny someone their dignity is to deny them their humanity, to reduce them to a mere shadow of their potential, to rob them of their hopes, their dreams, and their very sense of self-worth. In doing so, we not only harm them, but harm ourselves. For the world we create is one in which the dignity of all people is compromised. This speech speaks not only to those who suffer directly from injustice and inequality, but to all of us who have the ability and the responsibility to act. It asks us to recognize that our collective future is tied to the dignity of every individual. We cannot build a peaceful, prosperous, or just world without first acknowledging and addressing the systemic violations of human dignity that plague our global community. The fight for human dignity is not one that can be waged by any single person or nation alone. It is a collective effort, one that requires the commitment and action of all of us. As we reflect on this powerful message, we are reminded that the true measure of a just society is not how it treats the privileged few, but how it treats the most vulnerable. The true test of our shared humanity is not in our wealth or our power, but in our capacity to uplift those who have been left behind, and to ensure that every person, regardless of where they are born or what challenges they face, is afforded the dignity they deserve. The message of this speech is clear. Until every person is able to live a life of dignity and respect, our global community will remain incomplete. It is time for us to come together, not just to acknowledge this truth, but to act upon it, ensuring that no one is ever left behind in the fight for human dignity. The words we've heard today leave no room for delay. They are not just a call to action, they are a stark warning that the time to act is now. The challenges we face, whether they be climate change, inequality, or conflict, are growing at an alarming rate, and we can no longer afford to ignore the urgency of these crises. The window of opportunity to make meaningful change is closing, and with each passing day, the consequences of inaction become more severe and irreversible. There is no more time for complacency, no more room for excuses. If we are to secure a future for our children, we must summon the courage to confront these challenges with the urgency and determination they demand, before it's too late. Climate change is perhaps the most pressing example of how the consequences of inaction are becoming increasingly apparent. The planet is warming at an unprecedented rate, and with each degree rise in temperature, we are seeing more extreme weather events, droughts, floods, wildfires, and storms that disrupt the lives of millions. Ecosystems are being destroyed, crops are failing, and coastal communities are sinking beneath rising seas. The impacts of climate change are not a distant threat. They are happening now, and they are affecting people today. Vulnerable populations, especially those in the global south, are bearing the brunt of this crisis. Yet they are often the least responsible for the emissions that have driven it. And while these impacts are already devastating, the longer we delay meaningful action, the worse they will become. We cannot afford to continue down this path of inaction. The time to act on climate change is now, not in a few years or decades. Every moment of delay compounds the damage, and the cost of inaction is growing exponentially. Similarly, the issue of inequality continues to deepen, both within and between nations. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening, and social mobility is becoming increasingly difficult for those born into poverty. Around the world, millions of people live in conditions of extreme deprivation, struggling to access the most basic necessities: food, clean water, healthcare, and education. At the same time, a small elite amass wealth and power at an unprecedented rate, further entrenching the systems that perpetuate inequality. This is not just an economic issue, it is a matter of human rights and justice. How can we claim to live in a fair and just world when so many are left behind, their potential squandered by the circumstances into which they are born? How can we ignore the cries of those who are denied the opportunities and resources that would allow them to build better lives for themselves and their families? The urgency of addressing equality cannot be overstated. If we are to build a more just and equitable world, we must act now to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, has access to the opportunities they deserve. Conflict, too, continues to ravage parts of the world, leaving entire regions destabilized and millions displaced. From the ongoing wars in Syria and Yemen to the increasing tensions in regions like Africa's Sahel, conflict has become a global crisis that shows no signs of abating. These wars are not just battles between nations, they are battles for survival, for basic rights and for dignity. People who have been caught in the crossfire of these conflicts face unimaginable suffering. They lose their homes, their livelihoods, and often their lives. Refugees and displaced persons are left without a future, wandering the earth in search of safety and stability. The failure of the international community to prevent or resolve these conflicts has led to a situation where violence is becoming normalized, where peace is an elusive dream rather than a reality. The time to act on conflict resolution is long overdue. The world can no longer afford to stand by while people continue to suffer in silence. Every life lost in these conflicts is a reminder of the world's failure to act with urgency and compassion. These crises, climate change, inequality, and conflict, are interconnected, and their impacts are not isolated. The longer we wait to address them, the more they feed off one another, creating a vicious cycle that is increasingly difficult to break. Climate change exacerbates inequality, as the poorest communities are the ones most affected by environmental degradation, yet they have the least resources to adapt or recover. Conflict, too, is often fueled by inequality and the lack of access to basic needs, creating conditions in which violence becomes the only means of survival or resistance. The time for piecemeal solutions, half measures, and incremental progress has passed. We need bold, decisive action across all these issues, and we need it now. The stakes have never been higher, and the consequences of continued inaction will only be more dire. In the face of these urgent challenges, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed or powerless. The problems we face are immense, and the solutions seem distant or out of reach. But that is precisely why we must act now. The longer we delay, the more entrenched these problems will become. We are at a critical juncture in human history, and the decisions we make today will determine the world our children inherit tomorrow. If we are to leave a world that is worth inheriting, we must act with the urgency, courage, and determination that these challenges demand. It is no longer enough to acknowledge the problems or to express concern. We must act decisively and without delay. This is not just a call for leaders to act, it is a call for all of us. Change does not happen in the halls of power alone. It happens when individuals, communities, and nations come together to demand better, to act for the common good, and to work toward a more sustainable and just world. The time to act is now. The challenges we face are daunting, but they are not insurmountable. If we summon the collective will to confront them, we can create a future that is brighter, more equitable, and more just. The urgency is real, and the time to act is now. We must take action before it's too late, for the sake of our children, for the sake of our planet, and for the sake of our shared humanity. Despite the overwhelming challenges we face, the speech we have heard today is not just a cry for justice, it is also a powerful call for hope. It speaks to the deepest part of our collective human spirit, reminding us that change is not only possible but necessary. In the face of so many crises, whether it be the devastation caused by climate change, the persistence of inequality, or the seemingly endless cycles of conflict, it's easy to feel powerless, as if our efforts are mere drops in an ocean of problems too vast to address. Yet this message challenges us to reject despair and to embrace a vision of hope. It reminds us that we are not powerless. When we come together, when we unite with purpose, compassion, and a commitment to one another, we can create a future where peace, justice, and human dignity are not distant dreams, but living reality. The vision of hope in this speech is not a naive or idealistic one. It is a vision rooted in the belief that humanity is capable of far more than we often give ourselves credit for. It is a vision that acknowledges the scale of the problems we face, but also recognizes the incredible power we possess when we stand together. Change has never come easily, and it has never come without effort. But throughout history, it has always been the collective actions of individuals, communities, and nations that have driven progress. From the abolition of slavery to the end of apartheid, from the civil rights movement to the fight for gender equality, these were moments in history when hope was not just a feeling, but a powerful catalyst for transformation. They remind us that even in the darkest of times, humanity has the capacity to rise, to unite, and to push for a better future. This speech challenges us to channel that same spirit of hope and determination into the struggles we face today. At its heart, this message is about unity. It is a reminder that we are stronger together than we are apart. The divisions that often seem so insurmountable, whether they be political, social, or cultural, are not as powerful as the bonds that unite us as human beings. Our shared humanity, our shared desire for peace and justice should be the foundation on which we build a better world. This speech inspires us to see beyond our differences and to recognize that the challenges facing one part of the world are the challenges facing us all. The fight for justice in one corner of the globe is the fight for justice everywhere. The struggle to protect the environment, to reduce inequality, to end conflict, is a struggle we all share. No one can stand idly by and expect others to carry the weight of these crises. Only through collective action can we hope to overcome the immense challenges that lie ahead. This message of hope is also deeply rooted in compassion, the understanding that the suffering of others is our suffering, and that the well-being of one is tied to the well-being of all. Compassion fuels the belief that change is possible. It is the force that drives us to act when we see injustice, and it is the light that guides us even in the most difficult moments. It reminds us that every life matters, that the pain of the marginalized and oppressed is not something we can ignore or dismiss. Compassion compels us to stand in solidarity with those who are suffering, not just in words but in action. It inspires us to work together toward a world where everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, is afforded the dignity, respect, and opportunities they deserve. In the face of global crises, it is easy to fall into the trap of cynicism, to believe that nothing will ever change, that the systems that perpetuate injustice are too entrenched to dismantle. But this speech reminds us that such thinking is not only wrong, it is dangerous. If we allow ourselves to believe that change is impossible, we surrender our power to make a difference. We must instead cultivate a mindset of possibility, one that acknowledges the obstacles in front of us, but also sees the opportunities for change that exist within those challenges. It is through our collective actions, our voices raised in unison, and our unwavering commitment to the cause of justice that we will build the future we desire. Hope does not mean waiting passively for change to come. It means actively working toward that change. Even when the road is long and the outcome uncertain, hope is the fuel that drives us to keep going, to keep fighting, and to keep pushing forward, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It is the belief that a better world is not only possible, but that it is within our reach. This is not a call for blind optimism, but for grounded, determined action. Hope is the recognition that while we may not have all the answers, we have the power to create solutions, and that each step we take toward justice, equality, and sustainability brings us closer to the world we seek to build. The urgency of this moment cannot be overstated. We cannot afford to wait for some distant future to begin making the changes that are needed today. But even as we confront these urgent challenges, we must hold on to hope. For it is hope that will sustain us through the difficult moments, and hope that will inspire others to join the fight. When we act out of hope, we remind ourselves that the struggle is not in vain. Hope is what allows us to see beyond the current reality and to imagine the world we want to create. A world where peace and justice are not ideals, but tangible realities. A world where we no longer turn a blind eye to suffering, and where every person has the opportunity to live a life of dignity and fulfillment. This speech is a clarion call to believe in that vision, to hold on to the belief that we are capable of creating a better world. It is a reminder that while the challenges we face may seem daunting, we have the power to overcome them. Together, through unity, compassion, and commitment, we can create a future worthy of future generations, a world where peace, justice, and human dignity are the cornerstones of our collective existence. It is up to us to make that vision a reality, and we must begin now.